Danny Martinez had only one concern that evening. Could he collect $20? He was 3 days late on his rent, and his landlord was growing impatient. He had been busking on the Venice Beach boardwalk for 6 months, and Danny had learned one thing. Doors songs brought in good money, especially Light My Fire. Tourists would stop when they heard that song, listen, and give money. Simple math. Danny tuned his guitar, placed his guitar case at his feet. It contained only 3 quarters and a nickel, and began to play. The first chords were familiar, memorized. Danny closed his eyes and focused on the song. His voice wasn't that powerful, but he could capture the feeling. When he got to the second verse, Danny felt it. There had been a shift in the energy around him. The crowd had grown, he could tell. But the strange thing was the silence. Normally, tourists would be talking, kids would be shouting, bikes would be passing by. Now, there was only the sound of his guitar. When Danny finished the third verse and moved into the instrumental part, he opened his eyes. A man was standing in front of him. Leather pants, white shirt, long hair, beard. The man was looking at him, just looking. Danny was about to stop playing for a moment, but there was something in that man's eyes, something familiar. Danny quickly scanned the recordings in his brain. Where did he know that face from? And then he realized, standing in front of him was Jim Morrison, the real Jim Morrison, and Danny's hands began to tremble. If you're curious about what happened the rest of that night and what Morrison taught Danny, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Danny's fingers froze on the guitar strings, but the song wasn't over. Morrison continued. When that deep, dark, undeniable voice reached Danny's ears, his sense of reality collapsed. Morrison was singing the song, not Danny's song, his own song, but accompanying Danny. The crowd was completely frozen because no one knew what to do. A woman began to cry, just tears, no sound. A man reached for his camera but couldn't take a picture. His hand was shaking. Danny stared, guitar still in hand, but fingers paralyzed. Morrison finished the last line of the song, and silence fell. The waves of the Pacific Ocean, the sound of a distant car horn, the cry of a seagull, none of it could fill that silence. Morrison looked at Danny and smiled. "Keep going," he said. "The song isn't over yet." Danny's brain struggled to take the command, but his fingers moved on autopilot. He touched the guitar, found the chords, and continued with the instrumental part of the song. Morrison took another step closer and came right up beside Danny, standing shoulder to shoulder with him. The crowd let out a cry, a mixture of joy, shock, disbelief, but Morrison just smiled and signaled to Danny, "Keep playing." Morrison leaned into Danny's ear and whispered, "Close your eyes. Stop playing the song for the money. Play the song for the song." Danny looked at Morrison, those blue eyes so close, so real. Danny nodded and closed his eyes, and he began to play. But this time it was different. His fingers moved more freely. His voice came out deeper. The song came from within Danny. Morrison accompanied him, but this time not with vocals. He clapped his hands to keep the tempo, supporting Danny's rhythm. The crowd watched what Morrison was doing, because this was no longer just a street performance. It was a lesson, a transmission, a ritual. Morrison was teaching a street kid how to perform on the Venice Beach boardwalk as the sun set, in front of a crowd of 60 people. And Danny felt his life change in that moment. Most people were used to seeing Jim Morrison in stadiums, on television, in limousines. But Morrison lived in Venice Beach, in a small house just a few blocks behind this very boardwalk. Morrison loved Venice because no one recognized him there, or if they did, they didn't care. Venice was full of hippies, artists, rebels, poets, and Morrison could disappear into that chaos. Every morning, Morrison would run on the beach, write poetry in a cafe in the afternoon, and wander the boardwalk in the evenings. Morrison loved watching the street performers, the painters, jugglers, musicians, because they reminded him of something he had forgotten. Art was made for expression, not for money. Morrison was now playing in stadiums. Record companies were making millions. But when Morrison saw those street artists in Venice, he remembered his days at UCLA, when no one knew him, when he just wrote poetry, when he was free. That evening, Morrison was particularly tired. The Doors were working on a new album in the studio, and he had argued with Ray Manzarek. Morrison wanted more poetry in the songs. Manzarek wanted shorter versions for radio. Morrison stormed out of the studio, got into his Cadillac, and drove to Venice. It was 7 in the evening, and the boardwalk was bustling. As Morrison walked, he heard a familiar melody. "Light My Fire." His own song. Morrison stopped and turned toward the sound. A few meters away, a young boy was playing the song on his guitar. Morrison approached and listened. The boy's voice wasn't perfect. His guitar wasn't professional level. But there was something. Sincerity. The boy felt the song. Morrison moved closer, standing behind the crowd. The boy played with his eyes closed, detached from the world. At that moment, Morrison saw something. Himself. The young Morrison at UCLA, the Morrison writing poetry on Venice Beach, the Morrison before he formed the Doors. And Morrison made a decision. He would teach this boy something. Morrison stood next to Danny, and the song continued. But Morrison wasn't just listening. He was observing. Danny's posture, the way he held his guitar, the way he looked at the crowd. And Morrison realized Danny was afraid of the crowd. Danny was playing with his eyes closed because he was avoiding the crowd's judgment. Morrison understood this because he had done the same thing at his first concerts. But then Morrison had learned something at UCLA Film School. The crowd is not the enemy, it is your partner. Making eye contact with the crowd strengthens the performance. Avoiding it weakens it. When the instrumental part of the song ended, Morrison touched Danny's shoulder and whispered, "Open your eyes when you sing the last verse. Pick someone from the crowd. Sing only to them. Then pick someone else. Keep going like that." Danny turned his head, looked at Morrison, confused. Morrison repeated, "Open your eyes. Look at them. Play for them, not for the money." When Danny began the last verse, he opened his eyes. Hesitantly at first, then a little more. He made eye contact with a woman in the crowd. She was smiling. Danny sang to her, only to her, for a few seconds. Then he moved on to someone else, an old man, listening, nodding his head. Danny sang to him too. Morrison stood beside him and smiled because Danny understood. The performance wasn't about technique, it was about connection. When Danny finished the song, the crowd erupted. Applause, shouts, whistles. Money rained into the guitar case, 5s, 10s, even a few 20s. But Danny wasn't looking at the money. He was looking at Morrison. And Morrison was about to show him something else. Morrison took Danny's guitar. Danny let go in shock, and Morrison turned to the crowd. "My friend Danny plays here every night," Morrison said, "and I want to teach him something. Music performance isn't just sound, movement, energy, connection. Watch." Morrison handed the guitar back to Danny and moved behind him. "Now play again, but this time move with the song. Don't hold the guitar steady, dance with it." Danny, confused, began playing the intro to "Light My Fire." Morrison touched Danny's shoulders and began to sway him gently to the rhythm. Danny resisted at first, then surrendered. His body relaxed, and he began to move with the guitar. Morrison stepped back and watched. The crowd watched too. Danny wasn't just playing now. He was performing. His body was speaking with the song, the guitar an extension of him. His connection to the crowd strengthened. Sarah Henderson in the crowd clung to her husband's arm and cried. "Michael," she said, "Jim Morrison is giving a street kid a performance lesson on Venice Beach. Do you see this?" Michael shook his head, unable to find words. Sarah thought, this moment should never end. This moment should go down in rock music history. Because Morrison wasn't just spending time with a fan here, he was educating the next generation. Sarah took out her camera and started shooting. Morrison noticed, turned, and smiled. "Shoot," he said. "Capture this moment, because this kid will be on the big stage one day." Danny almost cried when he heard this, but he kept playing. Morrison turned to the crowd and said, "The music. Industry tries to convince you that music is made in expensive studios with professional equipment. That's a lie. Music is made here, on the street, with the heart. Danny is making real music here, despite not having any of that. And that makes him more authentic than many musicians in the studio." A man in the crowd shouted, "Morrison, will you play for us too?" Morrison laughed. "No, this is Danny's night. I'm just a spectator." But then Morrison did something else. He leaned over to Danny's ear and said, "You know, when I first wrote Light My Fire, I was a student at UCLA. I only had a guitar and a dream, just like you. Now we play in stadiums, but we've lost that pure energy. You still have that energy. Don't lose it." Danny looked at Morrison, his eyes welling up. "How can I not lose it?" he asked. Morrison replied, "Don't play for money. Don't play for fame. Play for the song. Always play for the song." Morrison stayed for another half hour. Danny played a few more songs, Break On Through, Riders on the Storm, and Morrison offered little advice with each one. "Lower your voice here, raise it there. Look at the crowd here, close your eyes there. Performance is a journey, not a straight line." The crowd grew. Now there were 100 people. Some had come for Morrison, some to see Danny. But everyone knew they were witnessing something, a special moment. The sun had completely set. The boardwalk lights were on. Morrison patted Danny on the shoulder and said, "I gotta go now. But here's some advice. Go to Whiskey A Go Go tomorrow. Tell the guy at the door Jim sent you. Maybe you'll get on stage one night." Danny couldn't believe it. "Really?" Morrison smiled. "Really? But on one condition. Don't use the stand. Pick up the mic. Be free." Danny nodded, unable to find the words. Before disappearing into the crowd, Morrison turned and said one last thing. "Danny, today you were playing for $20, but now you're playing for something, for art. Money comes and goes, but art lasts forever. Don't forget." And Morrison was gone, fading into the darkness as if he had never been there. The crowd applauded, but Morrison was no longer there. Danny looked at his guitar case. There were $200 inside, maybe more. But Danny didn't care about the money. He had something from Morrison, a lesson. Danny played the rest of the night, until 4 in the morning, until he was exhausted. And with every song, he remembered Morrison's words. Play for the song. The next day, Danny went to Whiskey A Go Go. He told the guy at the door, "Jim sent me," and the guy smiled. "Jim called last night. We were expecting you. Come on in." Danny entered the club and saw the stage, small, dark, intimate, just as Morrison had described it. That night, Danny went on stage to open the show. There was a microphone stand, but Danny remembered. Morrison had said, "Don't use the stand." Danny pushed the stand to the side of the stage and took the microphone in his hand. When he sang the first song, he felt it. Freedom. Morrison was right. The stand confined you, but with the microphone in your hand, you were limitless. Danny played 3 songs that night and received applause. The club owner said to Danny, "You can play every Saturday night if you want." Danny accepted. And so it began, Danny Martinez's music career. Over the next few months, Danny began playing regularly at Whiskey A Go Go. Sometimes Morrison would come, sit in the back row, and watch Danny. They never spoke, just made eye contact, and Morrison would nod, a sign of approval. Danny applied what Morrison taught him in every performance: eye contact with the crowd, movement, energy, connection. And Danny's fans grew. People referred to Danny as the Venice Beach Kid. Some knew Morrison had taught Danny. Others had only heard rumors. But everyone agreed Danny was special. In early 1969, Danny recorded his first EP, 3 original songs. Morrison came to the studio, listened, and smiled. "You have your own voice now, Danny. Not a Morrison copy, but a Danny voice. This is the right path." Danny thanked Morrison, but Morrison waved his hand. "Don't thank me. You were already talented. I just opened the door. The rest is up to you." Morrison gave Danny one last piece of advice that day. "The music industry will try to change you, your voice, your style, your soul. Resist, because staying authentic is more important than being successful." Danny took note of these words, literally. He wrote them in a notebook, and that notebook stayed with Danny throughout his life. On July 30th, 1971, Jim Morrison died in Paris. When Danny heard the news, he went to Venice Beach, to the exact spot where he had met Morrison. He sat down with his guitar and played "Light My Fire," but this time it was different. He played with tears, with pain, with gratitude. A crowd gathered around him, some knowing of Morrison's death, others drawn simply by the music. When Danny finished the song, there was silence. Then a man began to clap, and others joined in. Danny looked up and said, "This is for Jim Morrison. He taught me what music is. Not money, not fame, but connection. Jim showed me one night on Venice Beach that performance comes from the heart, and I will never forget that lesson." The crowd applauded. Some cried. From that day on, Danny played for Morrison every year on July 3rd at Venice Beach. It became a tradition, and over the years, hundreds of musicians joined Danny. Danny Martinez never became as famous as Morrison. He didn't play in stadiums, appear on TV, or make millions. But Danny did one thing. He stayed authentic. For 40 years, Danny played at Venice Beach, at Whiskey A Go Go, in small clubs. He applied Morrison's lessons in every performance, and Danny's influence spread to subsequent generations. Young musicians who watched Danny learned from him, and they taught others. And so the lessons Morrison taught that one night at Venice Beach still live on. Today, when a street musician picks up the microphone and leaves the stand, makes eye contact with the crowd and connects with them, plays the song not for money, but for art, Morrison's spirit is there. Because Morrison didn't just make music, he taught how to make music, and that lesson will live on forever.